It's great to be with you now, just to spend the next few minutes together. I'm here with Duncan Clark, who will introduce himself in just a moment, but my name is John Lacy. I'm the senior minister at the Elim Church in Chorley in the northwest of England, in the northwest region, and this is Duncan.
Hi everyone, as John says, I'm Duncan. I have the privilege of being the senior pastor at Coventry Elim and also a member of Elim's national leadership team. And I should probably tell you I'm married to Helen. We've been married 24 years this year. I have 4 kids who are anywhere between the age of 10 and 21. And I love running, I love reading, all that kind of stuff.
Great. So Duncan, we've been talking over the last few days and I've heard you talking to some themes recently that I just want to drill into, because one of the things that's been really empowering, I think, for people in the conference so far is to hear your honesty and your openness about some of the themes that have been a real reality check for us as ministers and leaders, and not just leaders, but people within churches, lay people or just attenders within churches who have found that their routines and their rhythms have been all spun on their head. You've been talking into this theme of hard-heartedness and half-heartedness and the danger of falling down that rabbit hole as the pandemic began. Can you just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think probably at some point in the pandemic, I definitely felt like I was trying to shut off my emotions, and it's the best way I can describe it in terms of being hard-hearted. And I think there was, just through the many ups and downs, the challenges, the demands, sometimes the anxieties, sometimes just the sadness of hearing stories of people going through some really tough stuff. I think I subconsciously figured out that the best way to survive it was to cut off my emotions. So to keep moving forward, just take it a day, one after another. And if I could disconnect how I was feeling, I felt like that was the way to survive it. And the best way of correlating how that works for me, as you know, I like to run, and I've run some marathons, and I learned this thing early on that it's called disassociation, where when it gets really difficult in a run, and especially if you've ever run a marathon, it's like 18, 19, 20, 21 sort of miles, when you've still got 5, 6, 7, 8 miles to go, and your body's is run out of resources and it's telling you to stop. The thing that you have to do is you disassociate from the pain and you think about something entirely different. So for me, you'd probably do this as well, because I know you're a runner, John. I just write a sermon in my head while I'm running, so it disassociates from the pain. But I think that during the pandemic, I tried to disassociate from the sadness and the grief and some of the anxieties and the fears around it by just disconnecting from my emotions and keep going forward. And I guess that's one way of describing hard-heartedness.
I think it's a really interesting concept. I get what you mean with the running, although I don't do marathons, but I do one of the martial arts, and in one of the belts you get more than one person attacking you in one go. So it's 1 person, 2 people, and then 3, and they're all black belts. And you're never going to win. You were never going to win. You were set not to win. And they say at that point, when it's all coming at you from every angle, you need to dissociate from the pain that you're feeling to still your mind, to be able to deal with the reality of the situation which is happening. So yeah, I get where you're coming from, but that rabbit hole of not feeling the emotion, I suppose if we stay there a long time, is a dangerous thing. So this half-hearted and this hard-heartedness, what life processes, or how did you start to overcome that in ministry? Because we're all on that journey together, I suppose, over the last 12 months. Everything's been spun on its head. And what did you find you needed to do to stop that becoming a real issue? Yeah,
I think probably I've been an Elim pastor 24 years, and I've been through various transitions in understanding in terms of what's important, what's going to keep me fueled, what's going to keep me moving forward during the great times and the tough times of leadership. And I would probably say that there's 2 key things that have probably been really helpful to me, maybe even 3. One would be family. Family's a really important root for me. I've always felt that if life is difficult as a leader, I love going back to family life, and I find that replenishes me. And then a really solid devotional life, and didn't prioritize that as a young leader. I think in my 20s, I started working in Coventry when I was 24, and I think I was just like went along with like the spontaneity. I'll just be spontaneous. I'll kind of connect with God when it feels right, or the weather's right. It's whatever it is. And I figured out later on that it's really important to have like a solid devotional life. And the third was like about just having some really good rhythm. So I'm a hard worker, like you're a hard worker. We're activistic leaders. We definitely want to give everything we can, but I do know that the only reason I've been able to maintain that for the long term is by making sure I have things like a day off, or I have like some retreat time, or that kind of thing. So I think for me, the things that sustained me during the last, what is a quarter of a century of leadership, which sounds dramatic, is those three things. But I think that's helped me again in the pandemic, leading with those three things as a priority.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing of what refreshes you and finding that again has been ever so more important, I think, within the pandemic. And it's great to hear somebody talking to the reality and the truth of that. Is, if we look on people's social medias and the church posts, everything's great and we're winning and we're reaching people, and every online Zoom meeting is brilliant.
Yeah.
But the reality is, behind those closed doors, we've all had to rediscover that lost art of rest and solitude. How does that look for you in the rhythm of a day?
Yeah, so for a good number of years, maybe like 15 years, have prioritized probably the first hour and 15 minutes. I often think about it as the first 75 minutes of my day. So I have been an early riser, and I know this isn't like everybody's cup of tea, but I would get up either at 5:45 or 6 o'clock and do like about half an hour devotions, then I'd run for about half an hour. And all in all, it's about an hour and 15 minutes of my day. And that's just, that has been my routine for a long time, and I feel like that's really sets me up for the day, because it feeds me spiritually and it connects me with God, and then it feeds me and helps me physically. And I think actually in life those two things can often be interconnected. And if I feel like I start my day with that, then it helps me for the rest. And I just feel like that's the foundation. And I love to do other things. I love other devotions in the day. I like to read. I often finish my day with maybe like a half an hour read, that kind of stuff. But those things like bookend my day.
Yeah. I heard you use a phrase which I jotted down here. You called it leadership, anxiety and fear. And it twigged something in me, thinking that the vast majority of people listening today will have certainly in the last 18 months experienced some fear and anxiety around the what ifs and how, and is it all going to work, and is everything going to be all right? And I suppose the reality is, in church life, when everything went online, for the majority of the congregation who were able to stay at home and do ministers, we still needed to come, we still needed to work. There was no get out clause. We still needed to make sure that services were produced and staff were looked after. And that's been a real challenge. That anxiety and fear is something that I really recognise. Is that something that you felt amplified as we went into this season for you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's always been like questions around what does success look like, and am I going to feel like I'm successful? And that's a difficult thing to assess at the best of times in ministry, because it's, how do you determine what's success? How do you determine like spiritual growth in other people and so on? And usually we go back to the ABCs of attendance, buildings, cash. Yeah. Have I got people turning up? Have I got enough money in the bank? And that's what I think is the problem, because the stuff that we would usually have the metrics of success for us, we could say, these people are showing up and there's people giving, and we've got a nice building or whatever. And I don't necessarily think they're great metrics, but we often turn to them. Those things are taken away from us for like a period of time. And I think there was almost like a vacuum that was created where we sat and we go, I don't know what success looks like for me or for the church that I lead anymore.
Our frames of reference went.
Yeah. And then you feel anxious, like, am I doing a good job? Fearful that like the church that you've been serving is like, has it disappeared? What's happened over that time? And I think, at least connecting with other leaders, in a similar sort of situation, they wrestled with the same kind of stuff over the last year, and it's very real.
Yeah, and I think it's empowering for ministers to talk about that, because in many ways we on a Sunday we expected to lift our faith and lead, but people sometimes just need us to be honest, and I think other leaders clearly need us to be honest. I've been thinking what it would have been like to have come into ministry in the last year, or to have come into ministry as an MIT or a young minister, you know, a guy or girl in a church, and you put in, and suddenly everything changes. These shifting sands move beneath us, and the terms and frames of reference have moved. I wonder if you were in this season as a young minister now, fresh again, what would you say? Like for me, I discovered days off again. You know, I had to have those days off.
Yeah.
I had to make sure that there was space. So what would you say to those young guys now who can't assess their progress as easy as we could 18 months ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, I would say over the course of leadership for me, I've probably been through a process where I've gone from purpose to performance to presence. And I guess that's my history, so I can't give somebody my history, but it's definitely what I've learned. So I think like in the early days, I was definitely trying to figure out what have I been called to do, what is my purpose. And then I moved on to performance and like, am I successful? Does any, you know, am I going to do well? And it's all about that kind of stuff. And then I guess like I probably found some emptiness in that. And then I started to focus my life on presence and really figuring out that actually I live and lead better when I've spent time with the Lord in His presence and make that a priority. So I think probably most leaders will go through that process, at least I hope that they would. I almost feel like I'd like to say to a younger leader, like accelerate that if you can. So because otherwise it can be so easy just to be taken up by, am I doing well? Am I working hard? Am I performing well? And you almost get trapped in the emptiness of performance rather than like the joy of presence. And you can live and lead brilliantly out of presence, but you can live and lead without presence, and it's pretty like destructive. Yeah, definitely.
And I think for anybody listening in, those are just great techniques to be able to, I think, travel through, not just endure ministry at the moment, but to try and find some enjoyment in the things in our lives that God has placed there, like you said, your family, or you know, the space that you find when you're out running, or the hobbies or interests that we have. I mean, I suppose as a young leader coming into ministry, I reflected that there were so many ministers that I knew that didn't have hobbies. They didn't do anything but church stuff, and I think that's proven that it's probably a really an unhealthy balance. We need that balance of interest and solitude and rest and work. And I think it's something that we will be rethinking as we come through the pandemic. So we're excited because you've got a book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I for many years have loved the practice of putting together sentences, paragraphs, like working with words. And I think probably like I'm surrounded by some friends who've often said, why don't you write something? You know, it's like you write little articles or little blog posts or, you know, and done some stuff at Elim over the years. And they've been pushing me to do it and almost like calling something out of me that they saw in me. And I think in the pandemic, I just felt like I had a bit of a different structure to my week and my days that enabled me to do some of that. So I've written a book. It's coming out in like the end of July. It's called Wholehearted, and it's firstly based on the life of Caleb. Caleb in the Old Testament just does this amazing thing where for like decade after decade he continues like serving God wholeheartedly. That's how the text describes it. And so he's surrounded by people who are moaning, he's surrounded by people who are negative, they're destructive, they're faithless, but he maintains full devotion to God. And I wanted to write about that. But also the book is also about like what happens in our heart, and it talks about like some of the practices that we need to do to keep our heart healthy, because as you know, you live out of the heart. What's in here overflows out. So I felt like it was just important to reflect some of that And so I've written this book. I'm looking for, it's the first attempt, and it's...
So how will it be available? How will people access it?
So it will be accessible from the 22nd of July on Amazon and like bookshops and stuff. And we'll have loads to sell or give away here as well. But it'll be easily accessible online from the end of July.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend anybody that's listening in to that today to grab a copy of that and to email it to the church here at Coventry if you want any more information about it. I'm sure they'll answer any questions, but near the time that'll be out on socials. I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's just wrap up with one thought, because obviously you've led here at Coventry for a number of years and you've got longevity in ministry. And I heard it once said that throughout a season of leadership, if you're there for a very long time, you need to reinvent yourself or reinvent the church a few times. And I suppose we're going through a massive reinvention in a short period of time in the church now. Energy for the road. How do we sustain that now into the next season? What would be, for somebody that's been in a church for a long time and they're feeling, you know what, I'd love to go and get a job at Tesco. I'd love a job at Asda, or I'd like to go. I remember my dad used to say when he was leading the church, I'd love to go and run a post office. It'd be so easy. Could open up at 7 and shut up at 2. What would you say to some of the guys? So we've spoken to some of the younger guys. What would you say to some of the older guys that are maybe in their, like approaching the end of their ministry? Energy for the road. What tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we've talked about some of the regular routines and the daily routines that like sustain us. I think sometimes when all the challenges are kicking off, the one thing that you have to remember is the moment of your calling, the moment that you've heard the voice of God or sensed God calling you to do something, because actually that's the thing that will keep you during like the challenges. So I look back on my life and like my sort of mid to late teens, and there were people like Kevin P, who I started attending his youth club when I was 15 years of age, and I hadn't attended Elim before then, and then Pastor Steve Kempton was like my youth pastor, and he gave me like opportunities to serve and lead. And they noticed something in me, and at that time I sensed the call to do the kind of stuff I'm involved in now, and the stuff you do. And I think sometimes you just have to look back and remember, actually God has, for whatever reason, out of like 7 billion people, He's handpicked me to do this job. And it's no better than anybody else's job, it's just this is what I've been called to do. And if you can recall that and keep reminding yourself of it, it's the key thing that keeps you like stable during the tough times. Yeah.
That's brilliant advice. Well, Duncan, thank you for taking time to talk with us today. I'm hoping that you've all picked up nuggets that you can use there and apply within your own life. So thank you for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate
no
it.
problem at all.